We have been using the word new normal a lot, especially after 2020. That only means that there was a time which was normal. अगर 2020 के बाद से जितने साल न्यू नॉर्मल है तो उसके पहले के साल क्या नॉर्मल थे? What does that even mean? The new normal, the word, what does that even mean? It only says that there was a period which was normal. Was it normal? Was 2019 a normal year? Well, it's time to rewind and look into 2019. Welcome to the Chalk and Slate podcast, episode 2. Good evening, everybody. My name is Pratyush, and welcome to the Chalk and Slate podcast, episode 2. The introductory episode has been great. The kind of response we got was wow. So जब हम रिकॉर्ड कर रहे थे, we thought दो लोग सुनेंगे, मैं और सचित खुद रिकॉर्ड करेंगे, खुद ही सुन लेंगे. But the response has been great. We thank all of you for tuning in and listening to the introductory episode. So today we start this podcast in a official manner, correct, Sachit?
Yes. Good evening, everyone. So now we have officially given the introductory rights to Pratyush, as he has been immensely popular with my peer group for his voice especially. And how does it feel, Pratyush, to be popular amongst like a generation younger to you?
Oh my God.
Probably. Are you feeling like a star or something?
I'm popular in my generation too, so that's something which is I'm habituated to. But yeah, jokes apart, it's great response. Yeah, I'm like, people say good things, but the response at my end has been, opposite of the response you got. I'm like, so जैसे बोलते हैं ना कि आप जो we were discussing कि मेरे इधर जो response आया और वो मेरे पे ज़्यादा critique था कि यार you take long pauses and you think too much while talking, and but that is me. And मुझे response मिला कि Sachit is very structured and method. So I said, yeah, great. So, but the response has been great. The point is, people are talking about it. People are giving us good feedback, and only good feedback, good or bad, doesn't matter. Feedback will better us, and we love feedbacks basically. So yeah, it's great to know that people are liking this episode and my voice. So.
Yeah, just so feedbacks are like reinforcements, like positive ones, help us feel better, kick those hormones to do more, and negative ones probably slow the hormones down and do less. But yes, we have had great feedback thanks to all of you. You have been listening to it and sharing your opinions with us. We are glad that you are sharing so that we're able to get better, work on ourselves and stuff. Like Pratyush said, so in terms of our personal realities and identities, how I've gotten great feedback about Pratyush's voice, his flow, his XYZ, his content, and so on. And people who are comfortable with me are able to critique me better. And Pratyush says the exact opposite, that people who are comfortable with him are able to critique him better and give good feedback about someone they don't know, like here in this case me. So yeah, so that is how probably human beings work in some way, that if you're familiar with something, we're more comfortable giving and criticizing them at certain level. And if you're not familiar, probably people are good enough or kind enough to appreciate even if they don't know us. Yeah, Pratyush, what do you say?
No, I mean, the critiques are very, very important. And मेरा तो मानना है कि अगर आपके पास critique नहीं है तो आपको शादी कर लेनी चाहिए. So your wife becomes your biggest critic, and my wife is. So yeah, it's good. I'm like, criticism is always welcome. Criticism नहीं है तो growth नहीं है, is what I believe. Criticism बहुत ज़रूरी है, because that gives you that reflection कि बस तुम कहाँ खड़े हो, तुम हो कौन, तुम क्या कर रहे हो. So constant, that's a feedback loop. It's very, very necessary in anybody's life. And so about this podcast. So yeah, on that note, Sachit, let's start today's episode.
So we have already talked a lot about us. As we were discussing, one of the titles that came out to us was One Normal Year Please. But acknowledging the privilege that we have and privilege that we are part of, a privilege ecosystem that we are part of, we realized that the headline does not do justice to whatever that has been happening in the world. So we went a step back and looked at the world, how it was before the pandemic. the pandemic is something that has given the world a common denominator. Experiences during the pandemic, it has been so global that be it here or be someone place in Madagascar or be it place in say Canada or the first world, third world, second world, developing nations, nothing matters. It has been such a big shared reality. But this episode, we are going to take a step back. And this episode, we're talking about how the world was before the pandemic. But before that, I'll ask Pratyush to chip in about why we are talking about this today and why the world before the pandemic happened.
Okay, so let me give a bit more context to it and underscore what you just said. So, off late in most of our meetings, be it with the clients or internal meetings, there's this word which is coming up very often, which is new normal. है ना कि पहले नॉर्मल था, बीच में अब नॉर्मल हुआ और अब ये न्यू नॉर्मल है. दिस इज द लेंस वी आर विटनेसिंग द वर्ल्ड एंड आवर लाइव्स. सो वी सेड कि यार ये न्यू नॉर्मल है क्या और नॉर्मल क्या है, बिकॉज एवरीथिंग इज सब्जेक्टिव इन दिस वर्ल्ड, राइट? इट्स सब्जेक्टेड टू अ कंडीशन. सो ये थॉट था कि यार अब देखें ज़रा 2020 वेयर द पैंडेमिक हिट, उसके पहले नॉर्मल था क्या, या उसके पहले भी अब नॉर्मल था बट हम बात नहीं कर रहे थे. सो दैट्स द थॉट वी हैड इन माइंड एंड वी सेड ठीक है, इस पर थोड़ा सा डीप डाइव करते हैं, ज़रा देखते हैं 2019, 2018, 2017 कैसा था. और जब देखना शुरू किया तो पता चला यार ये तो कुछ भी नॉर्मल नहीं रहा था. इट्स जस्ट दैट हम बात नहीं करते थे. या सचित?
या सो जब हम बात कर रहे थे, मतलब द एनालॉजी दैट स्ट्रक इनटू माइंड वाज कि 2020 वाज द ईयर जहाँ पे इट इज लाइक एन EDM म्यूजिक का ड्रॉप, एंड बिफोर इट 2019 everything was building up so much so as like Pratyush said, we researched and we dived into the years before the pandemic. So in retrospect we realize, or in hindsight, or while we researched, we realized that 2019 was such an eventful year. After this after the big pandemic break, and in 2022 would not think that was the year 2019 was that eventful. There's a meme as well ki lot out 2019, but 2019 was so consequential to an extent that probably would not have thought about. And yes, so in this episode we're trying to get back in 2019, and we are going to talk about 2019, the year we have a very good hindsight bias about. So yes.
Okay, so first thing, Sachit, I would like to bring this to the table here is, I often tell my team, I mean, like we all are part of one team, so I often tell the team and the clients and everybody, whenever we are discussing on something which has happened in the past, always be aware of the benefit of hindsight. क्योंकि आप आगे बढ़ चुके हैं, आप पीछे देख रहे हैं और आपके पास बेनिफिट ऑफ हाइंडसाइट है और आप एक जजमेंट पास कर सकते हैं. सो उस चीज़ से हमेशा अवेयर होना चाहिए. सो एंड इट्स रियली बेनिफिशियल व्हेन वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट हिस्टोरिकल थिंग्स और हिस्टोरिकल फिगर्स और हिस्टोरिकल पीपल. अभी किसी के बारे में जब आप बात कर रहे हैं जो हिस्ट्री में है, सो आप उनके बारे में जजमेंट तो पास कर देते हैं, बट वो जजमेंट बेनिफिट ऑफ हाइंडसाइट से होता है कि बस जब अंग्रेज आए थे तो वो कहाँ थे और वो क्या कर रहे थे, ए क्या कर रहा था, बी क्या कर रहा था, सी क्या कर रहा था. सो वो बेनिफिट ऑफ हाइंडसाइट है. एंड वही हुआ. मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि जब हम अभी आज जब 2020 और 21 और जो न्यू नॉर्मल की बात कर रहे हैं, तो द न्यू नॉर्मल वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट इज पीपल आर टॉकिंग अबाउट विद द बेनिफिट ऑफ हाइंडसाइट. एंड ऑल्सो द फैक्ट दैट 2019 में जो इवेंट्स हुए, विच विल गो थ्रू वन बाय वन, राइट, एंड विल ट्राई टू सी कि हम उस समय कहाँ थे. And you will realize that, you all will realize, the listeners will realize कि यार 2019 was not a normal year by any, क्या बोलते हैं, any parameter. It was as disturbing as 2020 was, or as eventful as 2020 was. But to start off with 2019, if you want me to start, it was, I don't recollect exactly, but yeah, business was doing good. It was an election year. Yeah, it was an election year. Yes, 2019. Yes, 2019 was the election year. The क्या बोलते हैं, dance of democracy right? The general election time, things were high, it was hyper, and it was the time when the current government was in contest to win the second term, and second term is always tricky. So air was pretty election centric, and I remember the milestone we had in 2019 was this one event we did for a client, and it was a brilliant, successful event. Client was very happy. It was a super hit event. Client is still happy, thankfully. Uh, the other memory I have is Europe tour किया था wife के साथ. We went to Croatia, Slovenia, and Montenegro. Beautiful country, Montenegro, especially. Croatia is also beautiful. We went to Dubrovnik and that Game of Thrones thing. So it was beautiful. That there are two events which is very, very clear in my memory. And so yeah, so I was in. So I went to Europe. Where were you, Sachit?
Yes, I was a student. 2019. I was probably in my final year, second half of it. The highlight for me that year was forming a football team for the first time in my college's history. But like any other college student, I was looking forward to the final semester. जहाँ पे you get all crazy, look forward to that big farewell bash that you're going to have.
Yeah.
So 2019 was looking forward to it, but again something happened. Someone hit a bat. But 2019 was this event was the highlight of the year for me, and it was all academics, all life. Now I was also part of a college election. The vote there, the students were also kind enough to elect me as the president of the society. But obviously due to the pandemic and for XYZ reasons, I could not, deliver my responsibilities to the best of my abilities, so to say. But so those were the key highlights, apart from the academics, the fun, the hangouts, the people around, the learning, obviously, for forming the football team for the first time and being part of a, proper Delhi University election. Yeah.
You take me back to so many memories. I mean, like, now you're talking about like it happened in 2019. I was thinking कि मैं कब college गया था. It feels like long time
ago.
Ages
ago.
Long time ago. But the thing I was just listening and we are digressing off the topic, but I just want to bring it here. Let's see how things are still, even if we are like, so to say, two generations sitting here. But जैसे फेयरवेल है, ये कॉलेज इलेक्शंस हैं, ये आपकी फुटबॉल टीम बनानी है, आपको एक कमेटी बनानी है, ये सारी चीज़ें हमारे टाइम पे थी. सो ये जो इमोशन है कॉलेज का, वो बड़ा मुझे लगता है कि वो एसेंस वाइज चेंज नहीं होता है कॉलेज लाइफ. वेज चेंज हो जाते हैं. मतलब हमारे टाइम पे सोशल मीडिया नहीं था या था, पर आई डोंट थिंक, आई मीन लाइक फेसबुक हैज, I don't know. I don't remember exactly. Facebook आया था नहीं.
How old are you?
I am 82 born. So yeah, listeners can tell me. हमारे टाइम पे
that was a rhetorical question.
Rhetorical ठीक है, but I don't remember exactly. Facebook, Orkut. I remember. I'm the guy who's we are the generation जो Orkut पे शुरू हुआ था. So yeah. So college में नहीं था. Now I'm very very clear. College में social media नहीं था. Undergrad college में. But ये सारी चीजें थी. So ये सारी चीजें हमें, तब हमारा रिक्रिएशन यही था, कि कॉलेज में कमेटी बनाना है और थिएटर में हो. सो या यू ब्रिंग सो मच मेमोरी. दिस 2019 स्टोरी ऑफ योर्स ब्रिंग सो मच मेमोरी टू मी.
Yes, I'm glad. Again, I hope it brings back good memories for you guys as well. But what we want to discuss today is 2019 as a very eventful year, and perhaps the most unfortunate thing that happened in 2019 were the Pulwama attacks for me and the entire country. And it was really indeed very saddening. We really salute the martyrs. And the aftermath and the chain of events that followed holds somewhere importance in our country's history. And that is also something that is to be noted here. And so one of the highlights of 2019 that I have in my mind, in terms of like category, was environment. If you remember the images of the Amazon rainforest burning,
yes.
and the the politicians there being very
Bolsonaro.
nonchalant about it कि कुछ ही नहीं हो रहा बोल के. But how was your experience about it, and how the events followed, or how things were before it? Because 2019 was a very not a very a landmark year for environment in terms of Greta Thunberg rising more to prominence, and US backing out of the Paris Climate Summit. That was also big. So,
very, very big.
If you could throw some light on
Okay, so what I remember of this particular issue, this Amazon rainforest fire, which was allegedly started by the president, allegedly started by the president Bolsonaro. So, uska thoda backstory hai. This Brazil and rainforest. Brazil has been on my bucket list for long. I really want to go to that country and explore. And one of my brother-in-law works in Brazil. So, he keeps sharing pictures and around Brazil beaches, Rio streets, and he had gone for a trekking in Amazon. So that was the connection. And then the election was happening, and then like I said, I want to be aware. I keep surfing internet and reading up on Bolsonaro, especially reading up on Bolsonaro, what kind of person he is, because Brazil is an important country, so to say, right, because of the natural resource and other things. So I was reading up on Bolsonaro, and I realized, okay, now he's a character. I would not say positive or negative. He's a character. And then he got elected, and things happened, and he allegedly started this. And I was just, see, at the end of the day, now, something happening so far from you, I feel, that's my personal thing. You feel an anguish in you, but you really can't do much, right? What do you do? So, and that's the despair you have कि यार कुछ भी नहीं कर सकते हम, मतलब हम सच में कुछ नहीं कर सकते. And so I saw that, I'm like, how foolish it is. And then the statements were there कि boss, French government wanted to give Bolsonaro some money to stop this. Something happened, and he said, I don't want money because I want to be self-sufficient. I'm like, how can you be self-sufficient by burning your own forest, right? So I was like, yaar, ye kya ho raha hai? And then you read it up, and then okay, theek hai, chalo. But that was, if coming back to the context of this episode, that was an episode which was not normal at all, right? So it was like a very, environment point of view, Sachet. We are a generation, by now we know कि बस हमने environment की बहुत वाट लगाई है, हमने बहुत बैंड बजा दी है, and that's the reason आज के डेट में environment has become a passion point. Every product has this environment friendly, eco-friendly, organic खाओ, inorganic मत खाओ, and all those things, because we have realized कि बस हमने environment की बहुत बैंड बजाई है और ये irreversible है, ये ठीक नहीं हो रहा, right? जो प्लास्टिक है नदियों में वो है और हमेशा रहेगा. So अचानक से पैशन पॉइंट बन गया. सो आप देखते हो, आप पढ़ते हो कि अच्छा किसने क्या किया, तो वो पढ़े, वो मैं भी पढ़ा, लाइक यार ये क्या हो रहा है. सो दैट वाज माय लो. बट देन यू हैव यंगस्टर्स लाइक ग्रेटा थनबर्ग, राइट? मतलब relentless. That child is relentless. I'm a fan, so to say, and it's nothing wrong in saying fan. I'm just asking you, what's the Gen Z way of saying it? You can say you are a fan of Greta Thunberg.
Yes.
It's not
so. There is obviously another side that probably wants to persecute Greta, the entire lobby of the core industries. But yes, like I said, like Pratyush is saying, lungs of the world. Amazon is called the lungs of the world, and to see that burning, wildfires raging, and because of social media, the amount of shareability that it got, people. The collective consciousness or collective sensitivity towards that particular issue in terms of an environmental disaster, it affected me as well, because you could see people sharing, talking about it, asking for donations. So, and even not just my generation, if you could show those images to my parents, and they would also be appalled by it कि ऐसा कैसे हो सकता है, अब Amazon forest ranging as far as your eye can see, and that's burning, and the numbers that come out of it, wildlife dying, flora and fauna getting extinguished forever. These things they push you into a rabbit hole that probably you do not want to get into because of the information overload. but at the very outset of it, you know that the laws that is happening in this world right now because of that particular event. So yes, in terms of environmental consciousness, 2019 was a landmark year. Back home, if you remember 2019, the Array forest in Mumbai was also proposed to be cut down. And again, I'm not sure about the timelines of it. Was it before or after? But Array forest cutting down also got a great amount of traction because because of shareability, because of a generation, like ours, our generation was invested so much in something that they did not interact tangibly with, but had such a big emotional connection with.
Yeah.
Be it Amazon, be it forest. Perhaps that is the recognition that our generation or the generation younger to us, Greta probably is a generation younger to, or I don't know how the terminologies work, but these people, our generation or Greta's, or obviously people from your generations who are sensitive enough to do something about it or talk about it, even talking about it. So here I have this thing, people are always worried, are always are in the conundrum that what can I do, or what does even talking about it, does it help even? So like I'm giving you examples, Amazon, Array forest, these things got the traction because people talked about it. Talking about it led to people in power getting aware about it and doing things about it, and that actually did help. So yes, the collective consciousness did rise up to the issue of environmental sustainability, sustainability, XYZ. So 2019 was a very landmark year for that. If you want to add something, yes.
So I just want to add few things here. One thing you said about the collective consciousness, and the second, why it is important to talk about it, right? The Amazon forest, if you look at it in terms of area that was burned, it's about close to 9,000 square kilometer, right? And the lungs of the world, 9,000 square kilometer area was burnt in span of few days, right? So people, I'm like, good they talked about it, but just imagine अगर कोई इस पे बात नहीं करता तो क्या होता? ये 9,000 का 20,000 हो सकता था, 30,000 हो सकता था, कुछ भी हो सकता था. So it is very important to talk about it. But first, let me try to put my point on the collective consciousness. Collective consciousness for me, it works in both ways. It works in both ways, where it can be very beneficial for for a large part of it can be very beneficial for all of us, or also it can be very vile, because collective consciousness मेरे हिसाब से leads you to create judgment and prejudices. Fair?
Yeah.
Because collective consciousness में क्या होता है, you try to, because अगर आप judgment बना लेते हैं, आप एक bias create कर लेते हैं, you tend to ignore the statistics. So there's a beautiful book by Daniel Kahneman on this heuristics and intuitive thinking and collective consciousness called Think Fast and Slow, right?
Thinking Fast and Slow. Yes, thank you.
So that's about collective consciousness. But in case of Amazon forest and the RA which you mentioned, it worked. And why it worked? Because people started talking about it. And what happens when people start talking about an issue which really bothers them is the action happens. And it happened. See, this is my firm belief that politics of any kind is a demand and supply business. आप जो demand करोगे, politicians are bound to supply that, because उनका incentive आपको वो supply देने में ही है. Fair? कि उनका incentive क्या है politicians का? To be in power. They want to retain power. The modern age politicians, I'm not talking about the politicians who are fighting for their respective countries and their independence, but the modern age politicians' incentive is to be in power. Come what may, I want to be in power. So उनको वही supply करना जो आप demand करोगे. So in case of Amazon or whether it's Bolsonaro or anybody, or here in our present context, whenever there is a demand for a legit thing, the supply has been there, right? So in RA, people started talking about it, became a major issue. I remember it was all over the internet and news, and the action happened. So yeah, it's very important to talk. And so yes, so Amazon was one event which I feel again was not normal, and it happened in 2019.
So yes, that's a good segue to the next topic that we want to address and discuss. Pratish mentioned about power. So 2019 is also recognized as being the year of the protests.
Mm-hmm.
If you had seen, there were protests all over the world in 2019. There were the Hong Kong protests. There were protests in India. There were protests in Sudan. There were protests in Iraq, Iran, and some of them, say for example, Sudan actually led to the toppling of the government. People were forced out of power. So, what's your take on the equation between power and protests? Because now we're talking about power, and 2019 being that bigger year for protests. We can talk about back home how things were happening.
So, my take on protest, first you need to understand why people protest. The basic. Let's go back to the first principle. Why people protest? I'm like, घर में आराम से बैठे हो यार. वो बच्चा कॉलेज जा रहा है, रोज जा रहा है, वो रोज कॉलेज जा रहा है और वो रोज डे के बारे में सोच रहा है. ठीक है. अचानक ऐसा क्या होता है कि उसे सड़क पे आके वो बैनर लेके चिल्लाना पड़ता है. प्रोटेस्ट ही क्यों करते हैं? सो एंड दैट when this happened, this entire protest thing started happening, and I was like, okay, so I'm landed up, I think Malcolm Gladwell or somebody, I think it's Malcolm Gladwell said in a book, I think David versus Goliath, or if I remember correctly, our listeners can correct me, I think it's in David versus Goliath, where he says that the relationship between the government and citizen is based on a social contract, right? So we sign a social contract. So citizen signs a social contract with the government, right? The people who are serving us. And people who are in power, their job is to serve you, right? So that's the social contract. That's how the civil society works. That we are in contract. Like हमें पता है कि बॉस हमें ATMs को तोड़ के पैसे नहीं निकालने, कार्ड स्वाइप करके पैसे निकालने, right? So that's the agreement we have signed with the law enforcement department. Otherwise हमें जेल हो जाएगी, right? Now when people lose hope on this contract, right, तब वो सड़क पे उतर आते हैं. जब वो होप रहता ही नहीं है कि यार इस कॉन्ट्रैक्ट का मतलब ही क्या है, कि बॉस मेरे को सर्विस तो दे नहीं रहे हो, मुझे जो चाहिए वो तुम मुझे देते नहीं हो, या मेरी सुन ही नहीं रहे हो. It's not important to always give something to them, what they are asking, right? I'll point it out that I was just sitting with a real estate client of mine, 2 days back, and we were discussing on how things are panning out, next campaign, how to retain clients. So ये सारी बात हो रही है. Then he asked, यार retain कैसे करना है client को, client से referral कैसे लें. So I said, यार client मांगता ही क्या है तुमसे? एक client जो घर खरीद रहा है, जो 25-26 साल एक बिल्डर के साथ एसोसिएटेड होगा, बिकॉज वो घर EMI पे खरीद रहा है. सो वो मांग ही क्या तुमसे रहा है. एक किसी को घर मिल गया, उसे चांद नहीं चाहिए ना बिल्डर से. ये तो नहीं बोला चांद तोड़ के लाओ, उसकी माशूका तो हो नहीं तुम. वो बोल रहा है यार तू मुझे कंपैशन तो दिखा, मुझे एम्पैथी तो दिखा, मुझे कुछ प्रॉब्लम है तो मेरी सुन तो. एंड दैट इज एग्जैक्टली व्हाट सिटीजंस सीक फ्रॉम देयर रिस्पेक्टिव गवर्नमेंट, अकॉर्डिंग टू माय ओपिनियन. एंड इवन आई सीक फ्यू थिंग्स फॉर द गवर्नमेंट, राइट? एंड वही उस सोशल कॉन्ट्रैक्ट को कंटेन करता है और रखता है. वो जब होप चला जाता है तो लोग प्रोटेस्ट करते हैं. सो 2019 में अगर इतने सारे प्रोटेस्ट हुए हैं, और इन प्रोटेस्ट विच इज स्प्रेड अक्रॉस द वर्ल्ड, whether it's Hong Kong or the anti-CAA protest here or the 370 protest here or the Sudan, Iraq, Iran protest. So हर जगह के so it's a question on the power, powerful, not the people who are protesting. The question, the people in power should introspect. Probably they should listen to this and introspect. That was what happened with you and why people are protesting. People don't want to protest. Do you want to protest? I don't want to protest. Seriously, I don't. I want to just come, go back home, work hard. Really, I love what we do this podcast, chill at home. I don't want to come on streets. I come on streets in desperation and despair. I don't come on street because I want to, right? So that's my take, and that is what I was thinking while I was watching all this news. And to be honest, I've stopped watching news since 2013. I've stopped watching television since 2013. So I consume digital news, and it was all over. So yeah, it was not a happy thing, happy memory. But again, Sachit, it wasn't normal.
Yes, it wasn't normal at all. Yeah, so Social Contract by Jean-Jacques Rousseau.
Oh,
Yes, so
Social Contract was
Jacques Rousseau.
But I read it, I think it was in Gladwell.
Yeah, probably.
Gladwell, David
Yeah,
versus
he
Goliath. Yeah.
must have extended it.
Ah.
I haven't read the book. So yeah, it's a hypothetical agreement between the ruled and the rulers, those in power and those not in power. Yes. So yes, if someone had to look at the society now, they think that authoritarianism is rising and the rules of the social contract are being severed in the favor of those in power. But when you see these protests taking place with such enthusiasm, such knowledge, and such collective responsibility towards that cause, there is hope. Where was I during the protest? I was in Delhi. Delhi,
nice.
The national capital.
Oh, interesting.
In terms of the CA and Article 373 protest. Just a side note here: we are heavily opinionated people. We have political and personal and social opinions, but we're trying to keep it as normal and non-repulsive as possible. So yeah, Article 370 was a very big deal in India's history. But the outrage that the anti-CAA or anti-CAB protests saw, was something beautiful. In terms of, again, taking back the dance of the democracy, so to say, students coming out, elderly coming out, people were actually playing music there. People were actually performing there. The poetry that came out, "Sab kuch yaad rakha jayega," "Hum dekhenge." For those who may not share my lens of the world, our lens of the world, that is very fair. We're just trying to appreciate the efforts that were taken by people to talk about their rights or to fight for their rights. It was just a very nice thing to see for someone who's hopeful and someone who's optimistic about restoring the balance of social contract, so to say. An idealistic statement, but that's the larger goal again.
I was just listening to you, and you have the first person's experience of the protest, so it's fascinating. Yeah, you were right. When people come out on street, and protests are, and you look back in history, right? Every protest if you go back and read about it, you'll find poetry coming out of it. There's something with the protest. You'll kind of find, I'm like, look at the Indian independence, right? All the protests, whether it's the Quit India or the protests around it or before it, after. Beautiful poetry, beautiful painting comes. Because see, what I feel in that protest, when you're protesting for something, right? And in that magnitude with thousands and lakhs of people are together and they're all shattered, right? There's this, in that chaos, there's beautiful calmness, right? Because it's like shared गम बोलते हैं ना, गम तो बांटने से कम होता है, करेक्ट? सो अब गम बंट रहा है, इन सबका गम एक ही है भाई, बट गया. सो वहाँ पे बहुत पीस आ जाता है. एंड देन बिकॉज इतने होपलेस हो चुके हैं, इसलिए सड़क पे हैं क्योंकि होपलेस हैं. आप क्या करोगे? मतलब वो होता है ना, जो मैं आपको अमेजोन पे बोल रहा था तुम्हें कि यार लगता है यार कि कुछ औकात है क्या हमारी, कुछ कर सकते हैं क्या? वहाँ पे कुछ ऑप्शन ही नहीं है अदर दैन टू राइट or to sing or to paint. So वो it's like emotion जो दबा हुआ होता है उसको vent out करते हैं through art, and that's the beauty of art, so to say. I love that. So वो बोलते हैं ना हमारे उसमें भी कि यार कॉपीराइटर तब लिखेगा जब वो जोन में जाएगा. वो जोन वही है. तो वो सब जोन में थे, चाहे आप इराक बोलें, इंडिया का बोलें या कहीं का भी, सब जोन में थे. और वहाँ से पोइट्री आई थी. इफ़ यू रिमेंबर, सुदान का the iconic picture, that girl on the top of this van, and then she has this. It was Sudan, or I think it was Sudan. She was waving a flag, because I think Sudani's protest was led by women. The women power. I think this episode will come on the Women's Day.
Yes,
right?
yes.
So, and that protest is the girls were the flag bearers, and so in most of the protests in the country also,
So in the Shaheen Bagh
women
protest,
power.
in the Shaheen Bagh protest as well, women were
Shaheen Bagh
flag bearers of the protest. So again, here just to re-emphasize the point, we are fascinated by the exercise of democracy. There are no sides being taken here, and we are just conveying our fascination and our appreciation.
I love your fear.
Such are the circumstances, and I'm still young. As just to
live.
just to make a call back to the last episode, I'm still 22 and you're 40. So yes, the fear is a good impetus to be careful. So yeah, like Pratyush mentioned, art. Let's a video imagery that again took center stage was the burning of the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. It had all the attention of the world, and funds were pouring in, and it was a very, very distant experience. Probably people in France would have related it more. Probably people fascinated by art and its grandness would have been affected more by it. I was not very much affected by it personally, but what was your take?
My take, it happened 2019, again not a normal year. And I think 2017 or 18, we were there. We went to Paris, and तो Notre Dame तो वो है ही ना, आपको टिक करना है. Notre Dame है, आपका आईफिल टावर है, वो कनाल में आपको बोट में जाना है. सो वो तो किया, तो वो तस्वीर थी मेरे पास, तो वो देखा, एंड व्हाट आई रियलाइज कि आप कहीं जाते हो और उस बिल्डिंग के साथ कुछ हो जाए. एक तो फायर हुआ, एंड इट्स वेरी अनफॉर्चुनेट, बट वो हुआ तो वी फेल्ट यार हमारा कुछ पर्सनल लॉस हो गया. सो आई वेंट बैक ऑन माई फोन, आई वाज लुकिंग एट द पिक्चर्स कि कहाँ गया वो पिक्चर. बिकॉज आजकल सोशल मीडिया में क्या होता है, कुछ हो जाता है, एंड टिपिकली उस समय पीपल आर शेयरिंग पिक्चर्स, राइट, कि मैं यहाँ था इस समय, एंड व्हाट यू डू, लाइक यू एट टाइम्स सकम टू द ट्रेंड. आई सेड मुझे भी तो करना है. तो आई स्टार्टेड लुकिंग एट माई फोन एंड रियलाइज कि यार वो फ्रांस वाले जितने भी पिक्चर हैं हमारे, वो आई थिंक हार्ड डिस्क में है. सो आई वेंट ओपन द हार्ड डिस्क से फोटो निकाला एंड पोस्टेड ऑन इंस्टाग्राम. सो दैट्स माई पर्सनल thing with the Notre Dame fire. Other things, yeah, it was an unfortunate incident, and I took it that way. I just took it on the face value. I didn't think too much about it.
So yeah, talking about Notre Dame, I'm glad that you found some relatability to it, because there was a section of society who could not relate to it, and could not relate to the outcry of why there was such sadness or such support to a building going down.
Yeah, like I said, I just took it on the face value.
Yeah, so. Despite being such a landmark piece of architecture.
Indeed, it is beautiful. When it's beautiful, but yeah, unfortunate.
Yes, and such was
2019.
Such was 2019, and not a normal year. Not a normal year.
Yes.
Let's just take a step back. Notre Dame was a very specific event, but I want to talk to you in terms of society. That affected us all. Something that affected me personally. I remember I was walking in the North Campus. Just a side note, if you're not gone to Delhi University and walked in North Campus, please do. It's a beautiful place to walk and have, chill around. So I was walking in North Campus, and this video from New Zealand came in of a person which first looked like a live stream or a gaming thing. But, news, probably I did not see the news flashes properly. I looked at the video, and the video was not very much in mass circulation, but it was sent in the group, and I saw the video, and I have chills while even saying it, while sharing that. The video was so unfortunate. It was so sad. Wo banda, the guy, the person was actually shooting people down in the mosque.
Yeah.
And there were women, there were children, there were men, and it almost felt like too bad to be true, if that's something, and he recorded it like just being a game or something. It affected the narrative of white supremacism around the world, and people could see kya ho sakta hai, and if we water the extremist plant, so to say. So that broke my heart. I don't know how, if you have seen, how did you see it? How did you come across the news?
I consume a lot of world news, right? So it happened. And it's not that it was an event in isolation. Things were happening around. And if you look at globally, the things are a little hyped up these days, right? It's like us versus them is very relevant and that's politically very viable, right? But when I see an incident like this, such unfortunate, such vile, horrendous, मतलब इंसानियत के नाम पे बदनुमा दाग वाली चीज़ें अगर ऐसे जब होती हैं तो आई इट गिव्स मी अ फील यार सी हाउ पावरफुल हेट इज हेट इज सो पावरफुल एंड when you provide hate with a gun it's fatal, right? People are praying, right? And मतलब वो अपने प्लेस ऑफ वर्शिप पे प्रे कर रहे हैं पीसफुली एंड दिस गाय गेट्स इन फेसबुक लाइव पे जाके he goes on a rampage, kills I'm like I don't remember the number but he kills many people, right? Many innocent unarmed people. That madness. But then over the years it's not the first time I have seen this, right? Maybe and you getting disturbed and thinking about it gives me hope that okay, you must be what, 19, 18 at that time? Yeah 19. So if that gives me hope, right? That the next generation, the your generation is getting affected by it and thinking about it, right? Because I feel hopeless. To be honest, I feel hopeless. I feel कि यार लगता था कि जब हम बड़े हो रहे थे तो ऐसा लगता था यार हम मतलब ऐसी चीज़ें बहुत कम लोग ऐसी चीज़ें सोचते होंगे और करते होंगे, राइट? नाउ द रियलाइजेशन इज कि most of the people are have this bias. They think they live in their echo chamber, and not that they'll go on a rampage and kill people. That's a extreme situation. But yeah, coming back to that, let's not digress on it. And I always get lost with such things. I saw that piece of video, and I'll be honest with you that I didn't find it कि यार आई फाउंड इट लाइक हाँ ये तो हो ही रहा है हर जगह. इट्स जस्ट दैट आई गॉट दिस न्यूज, आई एम लाइक ये हो ही रहा है बिकॉज पीपल आर encashing on people's hate about each other. They are leaders who are encashing on it. This is bound to happen. But the good thing is he was arrested the next day and yeah, the law took its course. But yeah, the sad part, unfortunate part, yeah, I mean, like the hate is really powerful, and when you give gun to them it's lethal. And so yeah, that's the memory I have about that piece of video or news.
So talking about hate and guns, let's talk about America. United States of America. A man with white hair was impeachment process was started against him in 2019.
Yeah.
He lost in 2020.
Yeah.
But 2019 was also landmark because such a big constitutional process was starting against the sitting president, and he was very popular.
Mm-hmm. He's still very popular.
He's still very popular. Mm-hmm. Yes, and if you remember, एक photo viral हुआ था of a man and his daughter who were trying to cross. They were, I think, from the country of Salvador,
mm-hmm.
and they were trying to cross from Mexico from Mexico into United States, and they're lying face down in the water, and they had died while crossing in their attempt. That an image that shook the world.
Yes.
So and talking about people trying to cross, the Mexico thing was also very prominent in 2019, building
mm-hmm.
the wall, making mm-hmm. America great again, MAGA and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So was there any relatability there that you found, or was it just something that happened very distant and did not affect me?
Okay, so I'll take it. I'll try to remember. First thing first, relatability in terms of Donald Trump. I have my best friend, so to say, the closest friend, the childhood friend. He's a US citizen now. He stays in New York, works with Big Four. And interested in global politics, and I'm very much interested in the American politics because I find it fascinating. I find it really, really strong. Like we were discussing, the executive body and the courts and other things are very, very strong. And yes, the racism and other things are there. I'm like, it's more evident there than any other country in the world. So I'm very interested in US politics. So yeah, Donald Trump, I used to follow him. Because in my personal opinion, I don't know, I find US to be the moral compass of the world. I'm not saying any otherwise, but the moral compass of the world. Because world tilt kis taraf ho raha hai? Because again, I mean, we need to accept the fact that US is a powerful country, right? It's I think now this China is the number one economy in the world, but yeah, the US is a huge, massive economy, right? So उसमें interest लेना ज़रूरी है, and in terms of communication, also advertising, also the kind of campaigns they do. There's some iconic and great advertising companies there. So I follow their politics, and I follow through Trevor Noah, John Oliver, Jimmy Kimmel, Jimmy Fallon. So इनका बड़ा fan हूँ मैं. तो इनके shows, वो Tonight Show and all those nature, मैं देखता हूँ. So Donald Trump को उसमें देखता था, and the beautiful part of it, all these shows, if you look at it, if you watch, they are unabashedly, they abuse their president, right? And they critique him, and they used to critique him, make fun of him, jokes बनाते थे. But कहीं भी ऐसा वो आपको नहीं आता था next day news कि यार जिमी फैलन को जेल हो गई, जिमी किमल पे फायर हो गया, Trevor Noah and John Oliver. So Trevor is a South African guy, and John, I think, is Scottish. John Oliver got citizenship in 2017-18, that period. So जब वो शो कर रहा था टुनाइट शो, तो वो जॉन ऑलिवर तो सिटीजन भी नहीं है, एंड इज डूइंग अ शो ऑन HBO एंड मेकिंग फन ऑफ द US प्रेसिडेंट, राइट? सो वो सारी चीज़ें बहुत फैसिनेट करती है US की. तो ट्रंप के साथ तो मेरा वो था. एज ए प्रेसिडेंट वो कैसे हैं, आई कांट कॉमेंट ऑन इट, बिकॉज वो उस देश के प्रेसिडेंट हैं, वो लोग ज़्यादा कॉमेंट कर सकते हैं. हम अपने प्राइम मिनिस्टर के बारे में, प्रेसिडेंट के बारे में हम यहाँ कमेंट नहीं कर सकते हैं, तो हम दूसरे देश के बारे में क्या ही कमेंट करेंगे, सचित. सो वो कॉन्टेक्स्ट में तो डोनाल्ड ट्रंप का वो था. बट द थिंग यू जस्ट सेड, द फादर एंड द गर्ल क्रॉसिंग द माइग्रेशन क्राइसिस, सो टू से, उस पे मेरा पॉइंट हमेशा से बड़ा क्लियर रहा है कि ये नैरेटिव बिल्डिंग है. माइग्रेशन, सी अगेन वही है, प्रोटेस्ट वाली चीज़ है यार, कि किसको अपना घर छोड़ना है यार, किसको, मतलब अनलेस एंड अनटिल तुम्हें बहुत ज़रूरत है घर छोड़ने की, तभी आओगे, करेक्ट? और इस तरह, मतलब समुद्र क्रॉस करके एक बोट में बैठ के, जानते हो कि वो कौन आना चाहता है, कौन अपना घर छोड़ रहा है. सो ये कि वो आ रहे हैं क्योंकि उनको आना है US घूमने, स्टैच्यू ऑफ लिबर्टी देखने नहीं आना था उसको. So they are going through a mess in their own country. That's why they are fleeing. So because they are fleeing because the other countries are not taking a moral responsibility to accommodate them. And the countries who have accommodated, people in there, they have benefited on it. There's a beautiful book I recommend on this, is Good Economics in the Bad Times by Abhijit Banerjee and Esther Duflo, in which इनफैक्ट उसने प्रॉपर चैप्टर्स लिखे हैं इस पे कि बॉस, ये जो इमिग्रेशन है, इट आर्ग्यूज दैट ये जो इमिग्रेशन नैरेटिव है वो गलत है. ऐसा कुछ नहीं होता है. जहाँ जहाँ इमिग्रेशन ज़्यादा हुआ है वो कंट्री बेनिफिट करती है इमिग्रेंट से. सो वो बहुत अच्छी किताब है. सो एंड आई थिंक 2019 they wrote this book. Yeah. So again, it's not a normal year. So to wrap that thing is that I remember that photo, and I remember, but this is the thought कि यार ये क्यों हो रहा है, and I always think and I like क्यों हो रहा है, और I write something and I then move on.
Yes, so talking about writing, and in 2019 only, if you remember, Abhijit Banerjee and Esther Duflo got the Nobel Prize. It was a proud moment for India.
Very proud, yes.
Yeah, for their experimental approach to elevating poverty. Yes.
But yeah, Nobel Prize, what a moment, नहीं? Like हमेशा, मतलब हिंदुस्तान को कुछ मिल जाए ऐसा, नोबेल बहुत मजा आता है भाई.
So talking about India in 2019, one thing was also very much trending in the news or was very much popular was Chandrayaan 2. You know, how if you remember the country was looking and the rover took flight and it was going to land and then suddenly
they made a movie also, nahi?
No, that was Chandrayaan.
Okay.
It was Mars, so Mission Mangal.
Okay,
but Chandrayaan, it was like the rover was going, chief was watching, prime minister was watching. It was going to land and suddenly they lost connection. And it was, everyone was heartbroken again. But eventually they made strides in that zone as well. But this imagery of people getting disappointed that we could not land the moon rover was also
I
very
remember
much,
that.
very much in the news.
That night, I remember. People were glued on their TV sets. Just to add one thing on good economics for hard times, right? Like the one fascinating thing I read and I was like, मैं हर जगह बोलता हूँ. So this book argues that we don't give credit to poor people for their financial decisions. ठीक है, this book argues that कि उनका financial decision काफी sound होता है दोस्त, बहुत बार. So they, there are many anecdotes and research they put in the book to prove that point or to make that point, not prove that point, to make that point. But इस बुक में दो चीज़ बहुत फैसिनेटिंग है. एक तो मैं ये बताऊंगा कि उसने ये क्या एग्जाम्पल दिया. दूसरा जो बुक स्टार्ट होती है ना, सो स्टार्ट इज सो गुड दैट ही सेज इकोनॉमिस्ट्स को ऐसे कोई नहीं सुनता है दोस्त कि हम क्या बोल रहे हैं और हम क्या हमसे किसी को मतलब नहीं, बट आवर एफर्ट इज टू कीप राइटिंग. सो दैट बुक, सो ही पेज एन ओड दैट दिस बुक इज एन ode to the effort of writing and Richard Thaler so he thanked all of them. So coming back to that poor का economic decisions, poors का, so economically backward जो हैं उनके financial decisions को हम वो नहीं देते हैं, क्या नहीं देते हैं, credit. तो उसमें एक example दिया, बोले आप slums में डिश टीवी के एंटेनास बहुत लगे दिखते हैं. तो आप मुंबई जाएं तो आपको सारे धारावी में डिश एंटेना आपको दिखेगा. सी ऑफ ब्लू है. एंड लोग बोलते हैं यार, एंड आई हैव हर्ड पीपल, आई हैव हैड फ्रेंड्स एंड पीपल सेइंग कि यार इनके पास खाने को पैसे नहीं, टीवी बड़े बड़े लगाते हैं, इनके घर में देख लो, इनको सबको बहुत पैसे हैं, टीवी बड़े बड़े हैं इनके पास. एंड वी पास जजमेंट लाइक यार खाना जरूरी है, टीवी क्यों ले रहे हो? बिकॉज दैट्स वो ना कि यार तू तो खाने के लिए पैसे ही नहीं तो टीवी कैसे ले रहा है. दिस बुक आर्ग्यूज कि बॉस टीवी है तो तुम एक टाइम का खाना भूल सकते हो, टीवी नहीं है तो दोनों टाइम खाना चाहिए बस. बट इनके पास तो एक ही टाइम का है, तो एक टाइम पिक्चर देख के निकाल दो, पानी पी के निकाल दो. सो ये सारे बहुत सारे ऐसे एनेक्डोट्स हैं इस किताब में. सो आई हाईली रिकमेंड दिस बुक इफ समबडी इज इंटरेस्टेड इन इकोनॉमिक्स. एंड a friend of mine called it serious reading book. So अगर ये serious reading book की को थोड़ा भी शौक है, so this one book you should pick up, that good economics for hard times. So it's brilliant.
So when you're traveling from Pune to Mumbai, you go on the highway, you see that sea of blue, and the dichotomy of you being in privilege traveling and you see a sea of blue and you say कि यार इनके घर में तो एंटीना है and must टीवी में enjoy करते होंगे. That comes from such a place of privilege, and then we hardly introspect कि क्या होगा actual reality. And yeah, that's a good book. And talking about Richard Thaler as well, 2019, again talking about 2019 as a landmark year, I read this book of Richard Thaler, Misbehaving. It's an amazing book, also a book recommendation. So yes, again the topics that we discussed and the events that were that were part of this conversation were not exhaustive. और बहुत चीज़ 2019 में हुए हैं all over the world. We were just trying to see कि हमारे personal life में कैसे affect हुआ है. So in terms of environment, we got more conscious. In terms of protest, we got more conscious about it. We got more aware. In terms of migration crisis, we got more aware. So 2019 was in no sense of the term a normal year. It was indeed a very landmark year. Just like I mentioned in the beginning, it's like an EDM song, pop upar ja raha hai, and it's about to drop down and things take everything down into a kaput situation. Do you have something to add, Pratyush?
So basically this episode, the effort was कि एक लेंस तो दें लोगों को कि 2019 एक बार ज़रा पीछे पलट के देख लें दोस्त, कैसा था 2019. किसी भी एंगल से नॉर्मल तो नहीं था. तो ये जो न्यू नॉर्मल की बात हो रही है, इसके लिए कभी तो कुछ नॉर्मल चाहिए. सो एंड दैट that is something which we wanted. I don't know whether we have achieved it or not. That probably you can share on Instagram or whatever medium Sachit is posting these episodes. But yeah, so effort was this कि आप जरा पीछे पलटें. Luxury of hindsight जो है ये थोड़ा सा aware रहना चाहिए इस चीज़ के लिए कि हमेशा आपको अच्छे judgments नहीं देती है. So 2019 was not a normal year. And like you rightly said, and you gave this idiom reference, which I loved, that it was building up to 2020, right?
And what happened in 2022? That will be a separate episode.
Yeah, that's a separate episode. That pandemic में कहाँ थे? अच्छा, we wanted to give that what is that one common thing? शुरू में जो बोला है, so to answer that.
Small common denominator.
Common denominator क्या है जो 2020 को इतना बड़ा बना दिया कि लोग normal versus new normal बात कर रहे हैं. So हमारे हिसाब से the concept of shared reality. So pandemic, which we'll discuss in the next episode, will be all about pandemic and how pandemic was this shared reality, and that is the reason it has become big and people are talking about and obviously things in pandemic we'll discuss alag hi tha.
Again, that the shared reality made 2020 and the aftermath such impactful in our lives that we remember. So this episode is going to be released on the 8th of March, which is fortunately the Women's Day. And जाके please Men's Day कब है Google पे search मत करना. What do you think, Pratyush?
Happy Women's Day. I'm like, for me, Women's Day is... so the other day, Pratyushna, our client servicing person, she asked me, what is Women's Day for you? And I said, it's just another day because women are special 365 days a year. So my take, last, before we wrap this up and say thank you, is like, how can you make a day special for a woman? Like, your mother is a woman, your sister is a woman, your wife is a woman, so they have to be special, right? So women are special for me every day. And yeah, so Women's Day all through the year, but it is really important to acknowledge women because it's Happy Women's Day.
So again, मेरा भी वही है कि we are in advertising, and अगर आप communication अब देखते हैं Women's Day के दिन ऐसा रहता है ना कि women are given like 8 हाथ दे दिया है and they are juggling so many things in the world. And so it's just that even if you are just sitting in a couch and having fun, you are special. We are all special, not because of what we provide or what we deliver or what responsibility do we take. We are special because who we are, and that's it. Also, अब जैसे हमने एस्टैब्लिश कर दिया है, होपफुली 2019 किसी भी एंगल से नॉर्मल नहीं था, और बस अभी हम नेक्स्ट एपिसोड में न्यू नॉर्मल या कुछ हद तक एबनॉर्मल 2020 और उसके बाद के समय में जाएंगे. एंड we'll hope that you'll join us in that conversation as well. Just that in any podcast, in any episode, there are things that you like कि in hindsight कि हाँ मैं ये चीज़ भी बात कर लेता, मैं वो चीज़ भी बात कर लेता, but बहुत कुछ बातें many topics, many conversation, many insights get left out in the flow of conversation. So yeah, let us know if you have missed out anything, and let us know what do you think we should talk about next after we have talked about the big COVID. And yeah, hope you are having a good time, a good day, a good year, a good month. And that's how we conclude. Pratyush, final words, please.
Thank you.
Good
and
day.
Good night. बहुत रात हो गई.
To all listeners, I would just like to make a side note here. The quotes, books, movies, theories, etc. that we talk about in this episode or any other episode for that matter are available as links in the show notes. That is the part below the description. You can just click on them and explore if that interests you. Again, we are grateful with the response, almost overwhelmed. We are grateful that you are interacting with us, sharing your feedback across different social media channels. We are available on Spotify, Amazon, Google Podcasts, and even YouTube if that's how you want to consume us. Consume our content, not consume us. Yes, follow our socials and spread the word if you like it.